Welcome back to Buy or Buy. Today, we're looking at an absolute icon, the vehicle that literally established the boxy, go-anywhere Toyota Expedition aesthetic for an entire decade. We are talking exclusively about the 1980 to 1990 Toyota Land Cruiser 60 series. This is it, the original square Land Cruiser. This is the exact rig that put the Land Cruiser identity on the map outside of Australia and the Middle East, setting the stage for the 80 series we've covered previously.
Take a look at this gorgeous analog interior. You'll immediately notice something missing, right? Zero touchscreens. You sit in a modern SUV today and you are faced with 8 buttons, 3 knobs, 12 menu pages, and a touchscreen the size of a laptop. But the 60 series, it gives you 2 pure mechanical floor shifters, one for your transmission and one for the transfer case high-low range. You literally put a hand on the wood grain shifter, your other hand on the metal transfer case lever, decide whether to roll in 2-wheel drive or commit to 4-wheel drive low, and then you just proceed to climb a mountain. Honestly, this thing predates the era when SUVs even needed user manuals.
Okay, let's dive into this by mapping out the timeline. We've got 3 generations of full-size Land Cruiser wagons here, and each one has its own completely distinct character. Back in 1968, we had the rounded FJ55, affectionately known as the Iron Pig. Then, starting globally in August 1980, Toyota introduced our focus for today, the squared-off 60 series. It reigned all the way until 1991, when it was replaced by the rounded 80 series, often called the Burbuja. The 60 series sits perfectly in the middle as the definitive, blocky 1980s 4x4.
Section 1. The lineup, FJ60 versus the FJ62.
First up, we have the FJ60, sold in the US from 1981 to 1987. Visually, it's got that classic Toyota spelled out right on the front grille. Under the hood is the 2F pushrod inline-6 engine. This is a carbureted, old-school, incredibly simple motor, giving you a modest 135 horsepower. Now contrast that with the FJ62, which ran from 1988 to 1990. You'll notice the visual updates right away. It features the modern Toyota emblem, alloy wheels, and body color trim. But the really big news is under the hood. The FJ62 brought in the all-new 3FE inline-6 with electronic fuel injection. That bumps you up to 155 horsepower, and it came standard with a 4-speed automatic transmission.
Now, if you're looking at that earlier FJ60, you really need to understand the 2F engine architecture. This inline-6 wasn't brand new in 1981. It actually traces its roots all the way back to the Toyota F engine architecture from the original 1960 FJ40. By the time the FJ60 launched, this engine had seen over 20 years of continuous development. That guarantees incredible pushrod simplicity, but you definitely have to remember that it is decidedly old-school technology.
Section 2. Over-engineered for the Outback.
I mean it when I say absolutely nothing on this car is fragile. We are talking about serious, heavy-duty solid axles in both the front and the rear. We're talking about massive cast-iron engine blocks that simply do not warp or crack under normal stress. The newer 3FE engine on the FJ62 was actually Toyota's very first electronic fuel-injected inline-6 in a Land Cruiser, and it proved to be totally bulletproof.
And that brings us to a very crucial number, 400,000. There are multiple fully documented examples of the FJ62 with original 3FE engines that have comfortably crossed the 400,000-mile mark. Sure, it's a slow, deliberate vehicle, but it will simply refuse to stop running if you just give it basic maintenance.
Section 3. Predictable flaws and maintenance.
All right, let's talk known issues, because they are predictable. First and foremost, rust. Rust is the real enemy here, especially for cars from the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest. Before buying, you absolutely must check the rocker panels, the rear quarter panels, the lower frame of the rear hatch, and the main frame rails. Mechanically, those solid axle front ends need routine love. The Burfield CV joints want service every 30,000 to 60,000 miles, which is also when you repack the wheel bearings. Expect to spend $800 to $1,500 to do both. If you have an FJ62, that automatic transmission can overheat under sustained heavy loads. A rebuild there is $1,500 to $3,000. And for the earlier FJ60, that 2F carburetor needs periodic rebuilds, which runs a very reasonable $300 to $600. You might also face some minor climate control updates, like swapping out an HVAC heater core or converting the old AC system from R12 to R134A. But honestly, none of this is prohibitively expensive, especially in the context of the vehicle's appreciating value. You aren't just repairing an old truck, you're maintaining an asset.
Section 4. Market pricing and valuations.
Let these numbers sink in for a second. For the early 81 to 85 FJ60 models, typical examples trade between $5,000 and $15,000. Exceptional clean cars, those reach $20,000 to $30,000. Moving to the 86 to 87 facelift models, typical cars are pulling $10,000 to $25,000, with exceptional examples hitting $30,000 to $45,000. Finally, the highly desirable 88 to 90 FJ62 models sit between $15,000 and $35,000 for daily drivers, while pristine low-mile examples are commanding $40,000 to $65,000. And get this, the absolute ceiling of this market was a staggering $154,000 for an incredible 1989 FJ62 sold in May of 2024.
Just to quickly put those numbers into perspective against its peers, the rounded predecessor, the FJ55 Iron Pig, sits between $20,000 and $50,000. The more refined successor, the 80 series, ranges from $8,000 up to $50,000. And if you look outside of Toyota, a contemporary British Range Rover classic from the same era trades for similar money, but offers vastly less reliability.
Section 5. The verdict. Buy.
So, our verdict? It's a resounding buy. You obviously can't buy one new since production ended back in 1990, but used availability is strong, ranging anywhere from $5,000 to $95,000. We declare to buy because it is the quintessential original square Land Cruiser. Parts and specialist support remain incredibly extensive through Toyota dealers and a massive enthusiast community. Plus, these vehicles are appreciating steadily.
If you are ready to actually pull the trigger, here is our specific recommendation. Direct your search strictly to a 1988 to 1990 FJ62 with a documented service history, aiming right in that $25,000 to $35,000 range. You get the best engine with electronic fuel injection, the best automatic transmission, and the most refined trim options. Alternatively, if you're a purist who prefers a manual transmission and carbureted simplicity, a 1986 to 1987 facelift FJ60 for $15,000 to $25,000 makes a rock-solid backup option.
But hey, quick buyer warning here. We highly advise avoiding the 1981 to 1985 early FJ60s. Those early carbureted 2F engines can be pretty temperamental, and you really shouldn't take one on unless you have an experienced mechanic who knows exactly how to tune and rebuild old ICE and carburetors. Just make sure you know exactly what you are getting into before buying an early model.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. At around $25,000, you can buy a beautifully maintained 40-year-old analog expedition vehicle. Will this appreciating 1980s investment hold better long-term value and maybe even outlast your next modern screen-filled SUV? I think we both know the answer to that. Thanks for joining us on Buy or Buy, and we'll see you next time.